Okay, so we are on study unit 5, and the topic is project planning. So in this study unit, 3 fundamentals that is project planning, scheduling, and cost estimation of project management are discussed. In terms of cost estimation, the fundamentals of software costing and the factors which affect the price of a software are looked into and discussed in detail. The COCOMO model is discussed in detail as one of the cost estimation techniques. Let's see. Okay. So we will cover the following learning outcomes. Have a thorough understanding of the fundamentals of software testing. Also be able to analyze and evaluate various factors that affect the price of a software, which can be developed for external use. Demonstrate detailed knowledge of certain sections which must be included in the project plan, which would have been developed using the plan-driven development process. Have a thorough understanding of what is involved in project scheduling, and the use of bar charts to present a project schedule. Demonstrate an understanding of how to use agile project planning based on the planning game. Have a thorough understanding of cost estimation techniques and how the COCOMO version 2 model can be used for software estimation. So what is a project plan? In simple terms, it's a document that is used to outline everything pertaining to the project. It has certain sections, starts with an introduction that provides context as to why we're doing the project, then talks about scheduling, the project team. It also talks about pricing, okay? What are the items built and how much is it going to cost, okay? So it is very important. The project plan document is very important. Whether you're using the agile or the predictive approach to developing software, it needs to be done because it forms the basis of a proposal. Okay, so it becomes a proposal when you start any project, regardless of the approach you use. But we can agree that if you start to or if you choose to use agile principles, then that document is subject to change as time goes by. That is just the main difference, okay? So a project plan is created at the beginning of a project and later updated as the project progresses. Team leaders or managers use the project plan to support their decision-making about budgeting and project staffing, okay? So especially if you're using the plan-driven approach, this document is everything. It guides all your decisions. If you're using the agile approach, you just have it there as a starting point, but you don't really focus a lot or dwell too much on it, okay? It can be used as a way of measuring the progress of the project, contain detailed requirements of the system to be developed. So most people think that that's the only thing that's in the document, the requirements, but it has a lot of sections. So the planning stages, we know it starts off with the proposal. Here you're saying, this is how I'm going to provide the solution. These are the people that I'm going to be working with, and this is how much I'm going to charge. That's the proposal stage. Then we have the startup phase, which when the project is at its project initiation phase of the SDLC, that is startup phase. So when you have to plan who will work on the project, how the project will be broken down into increments, how resources will be allocated across your company. Then also periodically throughout the project, when you modify your plan in light of experience gain and information from monitoring the progress of the project. So you can see that this document very much evolves, but obviously this is really based on which approach you are doing, okay? And this is the most popular one, which the planning document evolves through. The agile approach is what causes the project plan document to evolve. And when it comes to the plan-driven development philosophy, you're going to be focusing a lot on this document. So it is an approach to software engineering where the requirements are known and the development process is planned in detail. Okay, so very important what you do at the startup phase. Okay, of the when you're using plan-driven development. So your project plan document must be thorough at the startup phase. So everything is well understood. Okay, there's no going back. Everything is formalized. Most people think that the plan-driven approach is a traditional way of managing large software development projects. It may seem that way. You may think that because we have a very large project, then it means that everything would be very well documented, 100% documented. But in actual fact, the plan-driven approach, it works best with smaller projects where everything can be predefined and everybody goes according to the document. Once we go to larger software projects, there's a lot of complications and certain things we cannot preempt. So we tend to drift away from too much of planning and too much of documentation, okay? Only done at the proposal phase. But I think it's important that they put it that way, that the people traditionally think that you will use plan-driven development in big projects, whereas we're most likely to favor it in a small project because it's not flexible enough. What does it contain? So what does this project plan document contain? During the planning phase, cost estimations can be drawn up and the software cost should be calculated objectively. There are three parameters which must be considered during the software cost estimation, namely effort costs, that is the cost of paying IT specialists, hardware and software cost, traveling and training cost. We're going to cover that in the next slide. So when you're estimating the cost of a project, you need to take into consideration effort cost, and that's person hours. How much are you going to pay the people working on the project per hour? Okay, so that is regarded as effort costs. Then you also have hardware costs. Sometimes you're developing a software and you will need to change the overall infrastructure at which the software will be running on. So you're going to need to purchase some sort of server, computer, machine. That is hardware costs. So not all projects will have hardware costs. Maybe the infrastructure that's already in place is good enough to run the new software. And then software costs as well. You may need to acquire any third-party libraries, especially if you're doing software reuse. Traveling costs, if developers are working through multiple sites, okay, they have to travel to different provinces or different cities. The company must foot the bill and be able to pay for their traveling costs because they're traveling on business purposes. And also training costs. Okay, as soon as it's released to users, the users need to be trained on how to use the software. So as soon as the software is released, you need to train the users. And to facilitate a training workshop, there's a lot of things involved, including catering and the cost of actually booking the venue and stuff like that. So you need to take that into consideration when you are planning your cost for your software. But at the same time, there's one element that did not mention here, is the fact that you also need to consider your profit, because all of these are costs. You know, you're going to be paying these things and buying these things, pay for these things and buying these things. So what do you stand to gain as a company? So at the end of the day, your profit must also be there. And you're going to see what they mention in this slide, that the price of a software can be calculated by looking into the development costs and the profit for the developer. So everything that we covered previously in the previous slide involved the development costs. The developer still needs to add their profits on top of that. And they say calculating development costs, one has to consider the following issues: business, organizational, economical, and political. Also risk and type of contract must be taken into consideration, since all these mentioned issues may affect the software pricing, thereby making the price to adjusted upwards or downwards. Okay, and there are other factors as well that affect the pricing of software. Okay, one such example is contractual agreement or terms. If you are the client and you tell the service provider that you need this project done and you need them to deploy the solution for you, but you're not really concerned about also acquiring the intellectual property or the source code used to build the project. So they build it for you and they deploy the solution, but they keep the code to themselves. That will make the cost of the software actually cheaper, because you're not buying the intellectual property altogether. Okay, you just want something built and deployed so that you can use it. Cost estimate uncertainty. If the cost estimate is not known in an organization, there may be a need for increasing their price above its normal profit. So there's a lot of uncertainty from the client side. There's a lot of uncertainty from the service provider. Okay, the client cannot state the nature of what they want to be done in the organization. So you also need to cover yourself by pricing the software slightly higher than what you normally, like how you normally do, so that when the client, as a project progresses and the client starts revealing certain details, you are able to cover the costs of that as well. Okay, so also financial, when it comes to financial health, if a company has financial problems, they may lower their price so as to win the contract. So you are a service provider and you are struggling financially, you're not getting enough business, you're not getting enough customers. You may feel pressured to lower your prices just to win a contract. So that could be also a contributing factor. Market opportunity. You want to tap into a market segment, and maybe you are just building websites before, but now you want to build mobile applications. Okay, so you're entering into a market that's probably already congested, and there's already big players in there that have a lot of experience, more than you. Okay, so what do you do? How do you become different? Okay, so you apply a differentiation strategy, and you're going to become different in the sense that you offering obviously more affordable services. So that is one way at which you can look at it, because now you're offering affordable services, then your pricing will be slightly lower than the market value. Requirement volatility. In scenarios where requirements change, a developing company may charge high prices to effect the changes into the system. Okay, so the concept of pricing to win. Pricing to win is a concept whereby the development company has an idea of how much the customer is willing to pay, and then they make a bid for the contract based on the customer's expectations. Some people think this is a bad thing. Some people think it's a good thing, but it is done out there. And it's all about having inside information, okay? Because you may not be the only service provider that's bidding, and the client organization may not reveal how much money they're working with, okay? For specific reasons, it makes business sense. We want something done, we're not going to reveal how much money we're working with, because one of the suppliers may bid lower than what we actually are willing to offer. So what normally happens then is that if one of the service providers has information about how much this company is working with, they can sort of pitch the cost of the software exactly or close to that point. And that means they get the maximum deal out of the project. Okay, so people say pricing to win looks unethical and unbusinesslike, but it is an advantage to the system provider and the customer. Okay, it is an advantage since the customer will get the expected system at an affordable price, and the system provider will only develop a software which meets the customer's needs. Okay, so Yes, companies client act in secrecy, but service provider get that information. It's all a pricing game. It's all a game, and everybody wants to win at the end of the day. So when it comes to this project plan, it outlines these basic things: the work to be done, who's responsible for the work, the duration of the work or task assigned, and product of the completed work, okay, or the deliverables. You can see here in this particular slide, they summarize the sections. So these are the common sections you're most likely to see in a project plan document. Okay, introduction, project structure, organization, who's the team, who's the project manager, who are the senior developers, risk analysis. In the last unit we spoke about why risk analysis is important. Okay, so you need to also outline your risk and how you plan on mitigating its effect on the project. Hardware and software requirements. What hardware is required? What hardware must we outsource? Okay, what software must we outsource? Those are all part of your estimation. Okay, cost estimation of developing the project. Then the work breakdown. We use several tools, and the work breakdown structure is one of them, to say these are the main deliverables and these are the sub activities per deliverable. And project scheduling also has its own specific bar charts, which have charts, dates, okay, which specify by which day a particular activity must be done. And also monitoring and reporting mechanisms. How will the project manager report to internal and external stakeholders? One of the disadvantages of using plan-driven development is that early decisions have to be revised since the environment in which the software is to be developed may change. However, early planning allows organizational issues to be taken into account during the software development. So when you're using the plan-driven approach, you will spend so much time on the planning. You will spend so much time on the planning, and the reason for that is we need to get it correct 100%. Because once we move away from that planning, we're no longer going back to the planning. So that's one disadvantage of it. We spend too much time on the formalities. And the planning process is an iterative process, which means you repeat certain things up until the requirements are satisfied. You can see in this particular slide, they show this process in the form of a diagram. So what happens is that you start off with your planning and you identify your constraints, you identify your risk, you define your milestones and the deliverables, okay? So once you know which particular, and you can use the WBS the work breakdown structure tool to identify what kind of milestones or deliverables that you want in your project. Then you need to define the project schedule, okay? And here you're going to be using the scheduling tasks. Once you've scheduled, okay, we have specific dates at which things must be delivered. Then you start to do the work. But while you're doing the work, you need to measure. Remember, we're using the plan-driven approach, so everything we're doing is already documented. So you need to measure what you're doing, monitor progress against the project plan. See if you're deviating or not. Okay, you're not allowed to deviate from the plan. If there are no problems, then obviously the project is completed. If there are no problems and the project is still not completed, it just means that you got to do the work, execute the work. You haven't been doing the work. If there are serious problems that arise, which some of them we may have anticipated in our risk management process, then you initiate your risk management strategies, okay? If somebody falls sick, staff turnover issue, what was your contingency plan initially that you defined here in the first step, okay? Or you may need to, if it's a really serious problem, then you just may need to replan the entire project. So you can see it's an iterative process. You go in circles up until you get things right. And project scheduling. So project scheduling is referred to as making a decision on how the project will be breaking down into several tasks. project scheduling also specifies how the task or to be executed, and this is achieved through the use of estimating calendar time for each task and the effort required to complete each task. Hardware and software resources must be estimated, and the suggestion of individual work to work on the task must be done and identified. So this is the work breakdown structure that I was talking about. You can see that it defines the main deliverables, okay, and the sub-activities that we must do to achieve that deliverable. So you take your project, you can see it says nothing about time. It just says how the work will be divided into mini projects, okay? And then we can use our more sophisticated scheduling tools, and those that reflect in terms of they use a calendar and they use bars, okay? And says that this particular activity or task will, so we start with the WBS, and then we put the WBS tasks in one of the calendar-based bar charts, such as the Gantt charts is one of them, and also activity networks and PERT, or examples of good scheduling tools which show us duration of activities, when an activity will start, when it will finish. Agile planning. So agile methods of software development are iterative approaches where the software is developed and delivered to customers in increments. Unlike plan-driven approaches, the functionality of these increments is not planned in advance, but is decided during the development. The decision on what to include in an increment depends on progress and on customers' priorities. The customers' priorities and requirements change, so it makes it sense to have a flexible plan that can accommodate these changes. So here they're just contrasting, okay, and I did mention to you guys already, they're just contrasting that agile and planning are actually things that contradict each other, okay? So you're faced with that challenge as opposed to the plan-driven approach. So there are certain techniques that we employ to estimate the cost of software. Okay, so organizations need to make software efforts and cost estimates. There are two types of techniques that can be used to do this. The most popular one is through experience. So we've done this project so many times before. We specialize in this. Let's say we specialize in hospital or whatever, school management systems. We specialize on that. So whenever a new customer wants to purchase such a software, we already know through experience how much it will cost, okay? All the development costs, we can break them down. So that is an experience-based technique. We use previous projects to predict the cost of future projects, okay? And then we have the algorithm-based cost model. Okay, here we use formulas, and it's more of a computational thing. Okay, so you're going to use some sort of model to some sort of program to estimate the cost, and you need to provide that program with certain information. Okay. And this may include the size, okay? What is the size? So you need to give information about the product you are trying to build, the size of the project, okay? What is the experience of the people in the team? And maybe even give it an estimate of the time frame in which it must be delivered on. So using an algorithm, this system is able to take this and make an estimation for you how much it will cost, okay, to build a software. So you have those two. I think the experience-based one is definitely the most popular one. And then we have COCOMO cost modeling, which stands for constructive cost modeling, and it's a tool, okay? It's another tool that is used. It's an industry standard tool that is used for estimating cost of software. So well-documented independent model, which is not tied to a specific software vendor. So no particular software vendor owns this COCOMO. Anybody can use it, okay? And it has a long history from its initial version published in 1981, which was called COCOMO 81, through various instantiations to COCOMO 2. So COCOMO 2 takes into account different approaches to software development, including reuse. So they saw that, look, this whole philosophy of developing software, it's changed, it's changing. We're no longer developing software from scratch. So COCOMO version 2 needs to take into account that now and then organizations do software reuse, and that's exactly what it does. And you're going to see in this slide that there are different types of COCOMO 2 estimation methods. Okay, so the first one is we estimate the cost of software based on the number of application points. Okay, and what this means is if we're building a system is applications of applications. Okay, so it's an ecosystem of applications. So we look at how many applications are we actually composing together to build this system. So if you're using number of application points, it means your basis for estimating the code of the software is based on the number of applications that we're actually integrating. Okay, so that's one of the COCOMO estimation methods. Then we have number of function points. And here we used to estimate the price of software based on the number of functional requirements or features. So we count the number of features, we look at the most high priority features, and we estimate the cost of each one. Okay, looking at the features, functional requirements, same thing. So number of functional points. Then we also have number of lines of code reused or generated, especially for those using software reuse. And this is what they meant that by saying COCOMO version 2 takes into account that organizations may also do reuse. Okay, so here we are measuring or estimating the cost of the project based on how much it's going to cost us to acquire these reused components from different components vendors. At the same time, remember that although you are using number of lines of code reused or generated, you're still going to write some lines of code because projects include code written by the development team and reused components, okay? So you may need to count or sort of mix estimation methods here by looking at the features that you wrote by yourself and also by looking at the components that you purchased externally. And then the last one is its number of lines of code, of source code. So here we count per line of code, and then maybe we assign a default value. Let's say maybe the software project is 30,000 lines of code. So we say, okay, we're going to bill the customer 1 Rand per line of code. Okay, so that's an example of how you can use number of lines of source code. So COCOMO, and this is COCOMO estimation model, and these are the different methods at which it can be applied. So in conclusion, this study unit talked about project planning, and it said that it's crucial to have a thorough understanding of which sections in the project need to be included in a project plan. Project planning takes place at 3 stages, namely at the proposal stage, during the project startup, and periodically throughout the project. Development companies price software using the pricing to win concept. Pricing to win ensures that the development company is aware of the customer's expectation, and then they develop a software which meets the customer's needs or expectation at an affordable price. So that is Unit 5. I don't know why they actually separated it from Unit 4, because these 2 units are very much related, okay? This is still part of software project management. In actual fact, in IS, they combine them into one study unit, okay? So I'll just provide you guys with the opportunity to ask questions regarding this study unit, if there are any.